Hi everybody, this is JJ from ASUS. I'm excited to talk to you about the latest generation of ASUS B860 based motherboards. So these are going to be utilizing the new Intel B860 based chipset, which is designed, of course, for the latest generation of Core Series Ultra 2 processors. This is the mid-range version of the chipset when we're coming down from the Z890 series of motherboards, which recently launched. Now, the B860 series is going to be a really solid foundation for those who can be looking to build a system for the first time or maybe upgrade a prior generation based platform and are really looking to not compromise on a lot of the core function features and specifications while leveling up quite a number of other items, whether it's going to be even a higher grade of IO, more diverse aesthetic options in terms of what you have available, as well as, of course, a range of course, form factor choices, as all form factors are represented here with ATX-based models, both in white and black, a white micro ATX-based offering, as well as even a mini ATX-based offering. So we're going to be going in this overview to help you understand the features, functions, and specifications, what differentiates these boards, as well as also how they stack up against our Tough Gaming series of motherboards. But I recommend, if you want to find out more about the Tough Gaming series, to check out the dedicated overview on the Tough Gaming B860 series of motherboards. So with that, let's go ahead and learn a little bit more about the B860 based chipset and also the minimum set of features, functions, and specifications that you can get on these ROG Strix series of motherboards. So next, let's go ahead and talk about how the B860 chipset compares actually against the Z890 based chipset. Now, for the majority of you, you're going to probably be considering B860 because it's going to be coming out at a lower price point. But some of you may want to be aware of essentially where the differences lie between essentially B860 and Z890. Overall, as a whole, though, for the majority, the differences are not going to affect you. The fundamental feature, function, and specification support is quite good. And for many of you, especially that are going to be building for the first time or actually going to be coming over from older generational platforms, there are clear upgrades in pretty much every key area. So you're going to be getting support for the latest generation DDR5 memory. You're going to have PCI Express Gen 5 support for your graphics and for your M.2 SSDs. You're going to have the latest generation IO specification support. So overall, you're not going to find that there's going to be really too many differentiation points that I think would affect you right now or actually even into the future. But let's take a look at some of the key differences. Okay, so here you can see we've got our quick kind of slide breakdown that's going to show you in a pretty easy to understand way what are going to be the key differences. First and foremost, you don't have CPU overclocking support. You can use any Core Series Ultra 2 Series processor on there, including actually K Series processors. But again, because you can't support that actual overclocking functionality, which is afforded by K Series parts, the recommendation would generally be to use non-K Series based CPUs. There's going to be a differential in terms of the PCI Express lane supported by the chipset, so 14 versus 24. And we're generally going to see this being most evident is just the generally reduction in terms of the total number of ports or slots or M.2 slots that you're going to find on the motherboard. But overall, you're going to definitely see here on the ROG Strix series, it's really quite nice when we take a look at what the minimum set of features, functions, and specifications you're going to get. Just as an example, on all the ATX-based models, you're going to have a minimum of at least 10 ports and at least 4 M.2 slots. So you really aren't going to feel constrained. The chipset uplink is also going to be reduced compared to Z890, so it's a by 4 link versus a by 8 base link. The primary graphics card slot that you actually have, so if we're talking about this graphics card slot, generally on a Z890 based motherboard can actually support lane splitting. So you'll actually see some models such as like our ProArt series of motherboards, which actually have 2 slots on them, which actually allow you to run dual GPU configurations for specialized workloads, or maybe where you want to have a GPU and a high-speed specialized add-in card. That functionality is not going to be afforded on B860. There's also support on Z890 with the corresponding CPUs to support actually 2 linked PCIe NVMe M.2 SSDs, one Gen 5 and one Gen 4. But what you're going to find here on B860 is going to be only one of those M.2 slots that is linked directly to the CPU is going to be active. Now, it can operate at a peak Gen 5 or it can also operate at Gen 4. So you actually have the fastest speed supported afforded to you. You just don't have the ability to run both of them actively from the CPU. That means that they're going to be running to the chipset. The reality is that while there's a little bit of a latency performance in regards to being connected to the chipset, the overall real-world usability is pretty much exactly the same. So there's no real big differential. And again, you're still going to have PCI Express Gen 4x4 based interconnects to the ones that are connected to the chipset. You're also not going to be able to run PCIe NVMe RAID configurations, so keep that in mind. And overall, the total number of spec IO configurations are generally going to be lower. So that means the total number of ports are going to be lower compared to Z890, and also the highest level of speed ports are going to generally be reduced. Although on the ROG Strix models, especially compared to the Tough Gaming series, there's actually a notable increase. Many manufacturers probably aren't going to offer actually Thunderbolt or USB 4 connectivity, but actually there are going to be 3 of the models under this ROG Strix lineup that actually all offer 40 40 gigabit or Thunderbolt connectivity on them. So that's pretty cool. So with that, let's go ahead and now take a look at the minimum set of specifications that you can actually expect on these ATX-based boards. They will be pretty close on the micro ATX and of course the mini, but because of changes in terms of their form factor and some considerations in respect to those form factors, we're only accounting for the minimum set of specifications for the ATX-based models. Okay, so next up, we've got our slide here, which is going to jump into essentially what do you get on all of the ATX-based motherboards. Again, this is going to be pretty close on the micro ATX and the mini ATX, but please check the corresponding product specifications or make sure to check out the corresponding sections in this overview video where we focus in on specifically those models if you want to ensure clarity exactly what you're going to be getting for that micro ATX or for that mini ATX board, because there will be some differences. So again, this is going to start off as the baseline being from the Dash A, which is our entry into the ROG Strix lineup, and then going up to the Dash F. So let's go ahead and take a look at these minimum set of specifications. So the first is going to be PCI Express Gen 5, so that primary graphics card slot that you're going to have on the motherboard. So that one right there for the graphics card is going to be PCI Express Gen 5. It also will support our quick release slim technology, so that's going to be an easy to essentially remove graphics card design that we have. We'll demonstrate this later when we actually go hands-on with the boards, but it's a really cool design implementation. For PCI Express NVMe M.2 SSD support, you're going to at least get one PCI Express Gen 5 slot that will be on the motherboard, and that will also support our quick easy latch design. It's actually pretty cool. Let me see if I can actually do it just from here. There's actually a latching mechanism. You can see right there, I can just swing it open, and then I can just literally lift the M.2 SSD out. I can put that back in place and it latches in the drive. Really super simple. This is a nice upgrade compared to the tough gaming models, which actually use screws to actually screw down that primary heatsink. So that is going to be an upgrade. And all the M.2 slots all actually have what are called quick latch designs, which also allow for very simple and easy installation of your M.2 SSDs. And we'll demonstrate that when we go closer on the boards in terms of our secondary camera here. You're going to have actually a minimum of 3. And again, this is the baseline that was set from our tough gaming models, but actually on ROG Strix, it's going to be 4. So there's going to be a follow-up slide that will be specific to ROG Strix. But again, this is kind of the minimum that you would expect on B860 as a whole, because it would even account for our tough gaming based models. So while we're noting 3 PCIe NVMe slots, you're actually going to be talking about on Strix, you're going to have 4 PCIe NVMe slots on the motherboards. Same thing here for the rear ports. It says a minimum of 8. You're actually going to have a minimum of 10 for the Dash A and for the Dash F. 20 gigabits is also going to be default, but you're actually going to get dual USB-C on both the Dash A and also on the Dash F, along with that internal USB-C. And then from there, you see USB 4 TB add-in card support. That is correct. The Dash A actually doesn't have Thunderbolt, but already on the Dash F, you already get 40 gigabits. So you're already going to have 40 gigabits on the Dash F. And as a quick just kind of teaser in terms of specifications, the micro ATX, the Dash G, as well as the Dash I actually also have 40 gigabits natively on board, which is pretty cool. Wi-Fi 7 is, of course, going to be on all of the boards, along with the Q antenna design, which is our easy to connect antenna design. We'll demonstrate that when we go hands-on with the boards, along with Bluetooth 5.4, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, alongside our tough or ROG LandGuard design, which helps to protect from surges, spikes, sags. A minimum of at least 6 chassis fan headers that you're going to have there, along with an AIO pump header. Of course, that is specific to the ATX-based models and not the smaller form factor boards. And our new 8-point fan control, which is a really big improvement in terms of giving you more granularity and control for any fans that you connect directly to the motherboard. Rounding out minimum specifications, we have ProCool power connectors, which are going to be thicker pins for those primary CPU power connectors, improving their current handling and overall lowering resistance. QLED with dim detect, which helps to actually just help to extend and improve the diagnostic functionality from those 4 diagnostic LEDs which are on the board. A full HD UEFI BIOS, which is sharper and clearer. A Q dashboard utility, and we'll show this a little bit later on. It's a cool visual utility that helps you understand all the ports and slots that are being utilized on your boards. ASUS AI Advisor, a very cool web-based application that essentially uses a chat GPT-like system. It allows you to ask questions about your hardware features, functions, and specs, but actually has hooks directly into the UEFI BIOS to allow you to actually have access to controls. Take, for instance, like something like fan controls. And then we've got ASUS Aura Sync support, where you can see like my demo system here, which has RGB lighting synchronized, along with Armory Crate, which of course is our one-stop shop for system monitoring, RGB control, and much more. And then Driver Hub, which is a web-based utility which we've introduced for managing all your driver and application downloads. So that's the minimum set of specifications you can expect. And now here we're going to pivot up from this slide set, which was designed from Tough Gaming as our entry to B860. We're actually going to specifically show you what do you get when you move up to the ROG Strix series of motherboards. Again, again, as a minimum expectation, and you can see some of the delineation. And we've talked a little bit about that already in terms of kind of comparing where this baseline was from Tough Gaming going into ROG Strix. So moving into the ROG Strix models, let's go ahead and take a look right here. You can see this is what you're actually going to be getting in terms of your overall upgrades. Some of them are very apparent. So the first one right here is going to be RGB lighting in terms of the IO shroud. You can see that cool little RGB lighting that we have on there. That of course can be synchronized in terms of ASUS Aura Sync. You have upgraded power delivery. So the VRM is going to be a higher grade power delivery design compared to the Tough Gaming models. That quick release design technology for the graphics card has been improved. So as compared to using a button or a lever-based mechanism that you have on the Tough Gaming models, here that's going to be fully integrated actually into the slot. It's called Quick Release Slim, and we'll go ahead and demonstrate that for you. As we previously noted, you've got 4 PCI NVMe slots and a minimum for these ATX-based models, along with that quick latch heatsink design, which is pretty cool. And also the primary M.2 SSD slot, which again, we'll show this closer when we get secondary cam, but let me see if I can go ahead and do this. If I remove that heatsink out right there, you'll actually see that there's a contact plate right there. That's actually a dual contact design, which means that the actual M.2 heatsink is essentially on the top and the bottom, helping to improve thermal dissipation performance for the primary Gen 5 or high-speed Gen 4 M.2 based SSD. The audio design is also upgraded. It's our Supreme Effects audio design, which also has a Savitech audio amp, which is improved compared to the Tough Gaming, and you also have an enhanced software suite that comes alongside those boards. The clear CMOS button is actually present on all these models as well, so that's going to be another upgrade. The OPT temp sensor, which is a nice kind of enhancement there for people that want to run more specialized cooling configurations and want a secondary temperature input source that can be mapped to have their fans respond to. You'll also have that present on the board. As we previously noted, right when we were talking about the baseline for B860 on Tough Gaming was 8 ports, but we clarified that actually on ROG Strix it's a minimum of 10 ports. So again, both the Dash A and the Dash F will actually come with 10 ports, including dual USB-C on the rear. You also are going to see, of course, with ROG Strix, if you come up to ROG Strix, you're going to have white models available to you in both the ATX and in the micro ATX. And then also DIMM-FIT. This is a really cool technology which we introduced in Z890, and it's going to be on the ROG Strix series of motherboards. DIMM-FIT is essentially going to offer you an advanced specialized feature within the UEFI BIOS that can help to improve essentially the success when it comes to overclocking. What I'll attempt to do is actually go through a specialized, essentially training routine, making low-level adjustments. And when it makes these low-level adjustments, it will essentially create a new profile for you. Essentially, it's an analog to your XMP profile that you then would have applied to the board that can improve, let's say, a previously not successful DRAM frequency. So an example, let's say you buy something like a DDR5 7600 kit of memory or an 8000 kit of memory. You run it on the board and you find that the system posts, but it fails to boot, or maybe it posts and boots, but then essentially it crashes under a memory test. So now what you can actually do is you can go into the UEFI BIOS, run DIMM-FIT, which can take as little as maybe as a few hours, so like 3 hours, or it can actually take more than that depending on the density and the configuration of your DRAM DDR5 kit configuration. And then we'll leave you a new profile, and then you can load back up and actually see if it helps to resolve your actually issues. Part of that is because there are many specialized DRAM values that users just don't know what to adjust to help to improve the interoperability and compatibility at these essentially more sensitive speeds. And so there's many parameters that we do know essentially when they are made to adjust in alignment with the board's design, along with our auto rules and of course the DIMMs that we detect that can help to improve the overall success rate when it comes to DRAM overclocking. So DIMM-FIT is going to be present on these boards. Very, very cool feature. So with that, now let's get ready to go ahead and start taking a closer look at our motherboards. And we're going to start off with the ROG Strix B860-A gaming Wi-Fi. That's our entry point into the B860 series of ROG Strix motherboards. So now that we've talked about the differences between the Tough Gaming models to the ROG Strix models of the B860 based motherboards, we're going to start going into the actual motherboards themselves, give you the full flyover in terms of the feature, function, spec, and get a closer look at what we've got going on. So the first motherboard that we're going to take a look at is going to be the ROG Strix B860-A. This also happens to be our white themed ATX based board, so a lot of you are going to really find this as being a really great option, especially if you're on a more limited budget, but you want to be able to go with a bolder or brighter kind of look and feel for your PC build. It's got a fantastic look. It's got a great set of specifications. We're going to go ahead and throw it under our secondary camera and take a closer look. And do know, as I talked about a little bit earlier, and as you saw kind of in our initial preview, we do have 4 models in total that we're going to be talking about in this overview. 2 of them are ATX, one white, one black, then one micro ATX, which is going to be be white, and then one mini ITX, which is going to be black. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the Dash A. Okay, so here we've got the ROG Strix B860-A gaming Wi-Fi. So this is going to be the entry into the ROG Strix lineup for the B860 based chipset. You can see that it's got a really nice, bold and bright design aesthetic. We've gone ahead and updated the PCB to also be white, so it's got a really nice, bold and bright aesthetic to it. You'll see a nice, large VRM heatsink that we have here. This is, of course, an extended heatsink, just like what we have on the Tough Gaming series. So it actually goes from making contact with the power stages and the inductors over actually into the I/O shroud, which makes a connection here over to the integrated I/O shield. Now, see here, we've got a cool kind of little dual tone aesthetic with the silver and the white. I will go ahead and note there that that actual ROG I does light up. So let's go ahead and quickly just provide a little bit of base power to the motherboard so you can see the RGB lighting quickly. Of course, you can customize this, and you can go into the Army Crate software to be able to control the lighting. There you can see it in an adjustable kind of rainbow pattern. It can support or sync, so you do have that integrated RGB lighting that's going to be on there. In terms of the power delivery, this is going to be upgraded compared to the 12 power stage design that we have on the Tough Gaming series. So this is going to be a 14 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1 base power delivery design implementation with 80 amp power stages. And you can feel confident and comfortable in any CPU you want to run, whether it's a Core Series Ultra, a 5, 7, 9, whatever it might be. But again, keep in mind the B860 doesn't support overclocking for the series CPU. When we move beyond that, we can see right here we've got our dual 8-pin EPS power connectors. This is going to be for your CPU. They use thicker pins, which is going to be our ProCool power connector design. That's going to improve the current handling, also help to reduce resistance, so reduce temperatures. You'll also see a nice little kind of cool feature that we have here. It's like a little +1 benefit that you have with ROG Strix boards, that we put these protective covers on the primary pins right here so that they can reduce the likelihood of them getting bent. But if I go ahead and remove one of these, you'll actually see that that is going to be one of your fan headers. So let me see if I can pull this out quickly. There we go. So you can see right there one of the corresponding fan headers. So you will have your CPU and your CPU PT, and then an AIO fan header that's going to be on the motherboard. So that is going to cover you there. As we move over a little bit below that, you're going to see one ARGB header. Of course, you can multiplex that just like you can multiplex the CPU fan headers. While you've got ideally here for like a 240 or push and pull fan configuration, you can easily support 3 fans from one single fan header. Same thing for that ARGB header. If you want to be able to support 3, 4, even 5 ARGB devices, generally you shouldn't have an issue, especially if you're probably talking about 3 to 4. You got your 24 pin motherboard power. You've got your 10 gigabits internal USB-C, and then your legacy USB 3 right there. Now, as we move down just a little bit more, we'll see that we have our 4 DIMM slots. We've got some nice Patriot DIMMs right there, DDR5 memory. You can readily support higher speeds, so if you want to be able to run 6,000, 64, 66, 7,000, even 8,000, you're generally going to have pretty good confidence in terms of being able to run that. The board's got a good power delivery design for the memory, good topology design, good auto rolls, although keep in mind that anything that exceeds the default port table isn't inherently guaranteed, and you always have to account for the memory controller variance, as the memory controller will dictate essentially the speeds that can be supported alongside with the board and the memory that you're going to be running. When we go ahead and look directly below the CPU socket right here, we're going to see the first kind of Q release design implementation. This is going to be for the primary PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 SSD. It's got our Q latch design implementation right here, which is pretty nice. You pretty much just open that up, you pull that out, and you're good to go. And you can see right there, you've got your thermal pad, really easy heatsink to be able to pull off. If I go ahead and take, for example, my M.2 SSD, can angle it in there, push it in, and I'm good to go. And then from there, I would of course remove the thermal film that I have on the underside, but lock it into place. So super easy, really easy installation process for your M.2 SSDs. Now, one thing I do want to go ahead and note is if you want to eject, you just depress this little depression lip right there and you're good to go. This is a dual contact based design. That does mean that essentially it's making contact with the top and the bottom. This helps improve thermal dissipation performance, especially for M.2 SSDs that tend to have NAND or controllers on kind of front or back. So an example like here, there's this DIMM. You can see there's the controller, here's some NAND, and there's also more NAND on the back. So it can be beneficial for depending on the different designs of the drive, and of course the wattage and the thermal dissipation characteristics of that drive. When we go ahead and pop this M.2 heatsink back on there, it's very simple. Just angle it in, lock it into place, you're good to go. Right below that, you'll see your PCI Express Gen 5 slot. That's going to be, of course, for your graphics card. Now, what we're going to show you here is that normally on the tough gaming based motherboard, you would actually have a lever. There's no lever here that you actually need to depress to be able to remove your graphics card, but I want to go ahead and show you how it would work on this motherboard. So let's go ahead and grab a graphics card. We'll pop it in there, and once the graphics card is installed, if I actually go ahead and hold the board down, you can see that if I pull from the back, I can't actually remove the graphics card. It is locked in place, but all you need to do to be able to remove it is just lift it over here from the kind of the front of the graphics card at approximately about a 3-degree angle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and it pulls straight out. So very, very easy. That is going to be Q-Release Slim, and that's a key difference between the tough gaming motherboards and the ROG Strix motherboards. Is these have the Q-Release Slim design. They also have this nice Q-latch design for that primary M.2 SSD heatsink, along with the dual contact SSD heatsink design. So that is just something for you to keep in mind there. Right over here, you can see one of the other chassis fan headers. So again, we had two up at the top. Now we encounter our first chassis fan header over here on this side. Now, as we move down to the bottom section, we have one M.2 SSD here, another M.2 SSD here, another M.2 SSD here, and another M.2 SSD here. So in total, if we look at the bottom, this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 M.2 SSDs can actually be supported on this motherboard. They all feature the Q-Latch design, which is a very simple design to be able to install your M.2 SSDs. Now, the design actually differs just a little bit from this one. So I'm actually going to go ahead and remove one heatsink. So you'll see right here that these are captive screws, which is nice, which means you don't have to worry about losing the screws. And right there, you can see that you've got the M.2 SSD slot. And same thing, all I need to do is angle it in there and depress it, and I'm good to go. And if I press that down, that allows me to easily eject it. So very, very simple. So again, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they all feature this nice Q-Latch design. Now, as we move down to the bottom of the motherboard, you're going to see that you've got 2 SATA ports right here. Then directly below that, directly adjacent to that, you have the OPT temp header. So this is going to be an optional temp header should you want to be able to go ahead and have an auxiliary temp input source that you can have your fans respond to. Speaking of fans, we have 1, 2, 3 more chassis fan headers. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, plus the 2 at the top gives you a total of 6. And you've got another ARGB header and another ARGB header again with the other one that's at the top of the motherboard. We've got 3 total ARGB fan headers. Then you've got an internal USB 2 header. This is generally useful for things like ARGB controllers, or generally if you're going to use something like an ROG Strix series or Prime series AIO cooler, which we have those in white. They would generally plug to a USB 2 header to be able to control the pump or the screen that you might have there. Then from here, because this model doesn't actually integrate 40 gigabits USB-C on the rear like the higher end ROG Strix models that we're going to take a look at, or the micro ATX or the mini ATX, you do have the option to be able to support USB 4 or Thunderbolt via this actually header and then dropping in the add-in card. Lastly, here in this section, you'll have the isolated audio design. This is our Supreme FX audio design, which is upgraded compared to the Tough Gaming model, where you have a discrete Savitech amp and an upgraded audio codec along with an enhanced audio package. So that overall gives you the full over on the physical characteristics and the layout that we're going to have here on the ROG Strix B860-A gaming Wi-Fi. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the rear I/O on this board. Okay, we're now taking a closer look at the rear I/O on this board. So we've got an HDMI port, a DP port, then we've got 4 Type A ports, which are going to all be USB 2. So this is going to be USB BIOS flashback port, which of course allows you to work in conjunction with this button right here. And this allows you to update the UEFI BIOS firmware without the CPU, without the graphics card, or without the memory installed. All you have to do is connect a corresponding flash drive, push down this port, and will low-level update it as long as you have the power supply physically connected. You just need the 24-pin power. Below that, we can see that we've got our high-speed port. So we've got a 20 gigabit port. This is going to be 4 times faster than a 5 gigabits port and twice as fast as the actual Type A port next to it. So again, 20 gigabits right here, 10 gigabits right here. Then we have another USB-C port. So this is an upgrade compared to the Tough Gaming model, which only has 1 rear USB-C port. So you get 2 USB-C, one being 20 and one being 10, and then another 10 gigabit port. So 10, 10, 10, and 20 right there. And then in this block right there, you've got 8 total ports plus the last 2, which are going to be 5 gigabit type A ports, is going to give you 10 ports. So a minimum of 10 compared to the Tough Gaming series, which is going to have 8 rear USB ports. And then you've got 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, which is also going to be utilizing our ROG LandGuard design, which helps to protect it against surges, spikes, and sags, things along those lines. Directly below that, you've got our Q antenna and Wi-Fi 7 along with Bluetooth 5.4. This also uses our Q antenna design here. So it's a push fit design, has better signal attenuation performance. It's easy to be able to connect and remove, and it also really reduces the likelihood of you having to have kind of any threading issues, or also making sure that it's not really kind of seamlessly connected. So I'm a big fan of this Q antenna design. Then lastly, down there at the bottom, you've got your optical out and your line level connections. With that noted, that is going to round out the I/O on the ROG Strix B860-A gaming Wi-Fi. For our next motherboard, we're going to take a closer look at the step up from the Dash A, which is going to be the Dash F. Always one of my favorite models in our lineup. It really hits an amazing kind of sweet spot value proposition of really kind of leveling up even more functions and features and specifications. Also, I really love the fact that this model is actually going to be offering you Thunderbolt or USB 4 actually built onto the motherboard, where you didn't have that on the Dash A. Plus, of course, continuing just a lot of those great minimum set of features, functions, and specs that we talked about earlier. But with that, let's go ahead and throw this under a secondary camera and take a closer look at the board. Okay, so let's now go ahead and take a closer look at the ROG Strix B860-F gaming Wi-Fi. So this is going to be essentially kind of the counterpart to the Dash A. It's going to be in black, but it is going to actually have quite a number of upgrades. So it's not exactly the same as the Dash A. It is a higher end model in terms of its features, functions, and spec, although it is pretty close. So the first item is, of course, going to be right here in terms of the power delivery design. This is going to be a even higher grade power delivery, so it's going to be a 16 power stage based design implementation, 16 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1, again with 80 amp power stages, large, very performant VRM heatsink assembly, makes dual contact with the power stages as well as with the inductors. A lot of extended surface area, again, goes all the way over into the actually extended IO shroud area right here, even making contact with the direct integrated IO shield. You can see that really nice integrated RGB eye that's illuminated and of course can be controlled through the Armoury Crate software. As we move beyond that and we take a closer look right here, we can see we've got the dual EPS CPU power connections with the thicker pins. That's the ProCool power design. Of course, that helps to improve the current handling and reduce resistance and improve temperature performance. Right next to that, you can see your 2 primary CPU fan headers. They can be multiplexed just like the other ones, so you can support 2, 3, 4 fans from one single header. This is the CPU OPT, and then you also have one for an AIO. That's going to be for an AIO pump. This would work really well with, of course, our Prime Series coolers, Tough Gaming LC coolers, our ROG Strix coolers, all which we offer in black, ones with screens, one without screens. A lot of really great options that we have available. Right next to that, we have the QLED diagnostic system. This was also on the Dash A, so one for the CPU, one for the DRAM, one for the graphics card, one for the boot device. We also have the DIMM detect design. What that essentially means is that right now, without full power, I can't demonstrate to you, but let me go ahead and actually install, let's say, one DIMM. So if I was to install a DIMM on this motherboard, let me go ahead and turn that around. I was install a DIMM on the motherboard, but maybe not fully seated. So right there, it's actually been depressed and locked in on this side, but not fully depressed in here. That actual LED would turn on. This would be pre the actual post stage to let you know that the actual DIMM hasn't been fully seated. But when I go ahead and click it into place, that actual LED would turn off and it would let you know that the memory is now successfully installed. And so you could actually proceed with your system build. The really cool thing about that design too is, again, this is pre the post. So once you actually power on the system and it goes through the post, it'll still go through its normal 4 LED stages. Okay. Directly below that, we've got an ARGB header. You'll see though, directly above this, you do actually have a power button on the board. So if you'd want to be able to do a little bit more quick benchtop testings, things along those lines, or maybe you're just kind of testing things out, you don't have maybe the power connectors connected and you want to be able to power on the system, you do actually have that button available to you there. Below that, you've got your 10 gigabits internal USB-C, and then you have your legacy USB 3 right there. Okay, as we move a little bit more below that and we go over here adjacent to the side, we're going to see that we have the primary PCI Express Jet 5 M.2 SSD slot. This, just like the Dash A, has that nice Q latch design for that primary large heatsink assembly, so just open it up, pull it out, and you're good to go. And you then have essentially a dual contact design. Again, on the ROG Strix models, you get this Q-latch design with this nice large heatsink. This is not going to be on tough gaming. It will have actually a screw down low profile heatsink. Still does its job well, still will ensure the SSDs are cool, but here you get higher performance and more convenience. Dual contact design means that you make contact with both sides, just like we explained on the prior model. And again, just to demonstrate the M.2 installation, very, very simple. You just angle it in there, lock it into place. You would take your drive, of course, remove the thermal pad, and then from there you're good to go. Thermal film, not the thermal pad, right? The thermal pad is actually, you want to make sure that's there, but the thermal film that protects that pad. So, and then to remove that drive, if you want to, you just depress that and pull it out, and you're good to go. So very, very simple, and you're all set. So that is going to be that primary M.2 SSD slot along with the Q-latch design. Next to that right here, there's actually going to be another chassis fan header, so that if we're counting, that's going to be our third chassis fan header alongside the two at the top of the motherboard. Now below that, we can see that we've got our primary PCI Express graphics card slot. So this actually supports Gen 5 operation. And just like the other board, it does have the Q release slim design. So there's no button required. All I need to do is just put in my graphics card. It will be locked into place. And from there, if I pull it from the back, you see it actually doesn't come out. All I need to do is just go over here up to the front and angle it about 3 degrees, and I can pull out the graphics card, and that's it. So that's a nice upgrade, again, that you won't find on the Tough Gaming. It still has the Q release design, but it does require a physical button. So this is just going to be a cleaner, simpler design. Now, in addition to that, as we go here, there's actually some SATA ports. So there are SATA ports that are directly below here that you'll actually see. There's 4 SATA ports, so 2. So right there, and then another 2 right there. So don't forget that you do have those additional SATA ports. In terms of your M.2 SSD slots, again, you got 1 here, 2, 3, 4. So this board also has 4 M.2 SSD slots. And just like the Dash A, they all have that Q-latch design. So very, very simple to be able to lock it in place once you remove these heat sinks. And these heat sinks do have captive screws. So that means that once you remove that heat sink, you're not going to have to worry about the screws being lost. I also do like the fact that even with the larger base graphics card, if I do show you, I don't believe I noted this on the Dash A, but it would be the same on the Dash A, that when you do install the graphics card, this bottom, these slots are still actually accessible. Now this is pretty nice. This one right here, you might potentially still have a little bit of an access issue, but I think actually it would still work pretty well. But if you had a bigger card, it would definitely block that out. But that's the nice thing, is that even if this slot is blocked, these 2 slots down here at the bottom would still be open and accessible even without having to remove the graphics card. So I do like our design in that respect. There are some manufacturers that they have a unified actually heatsink block design that would limit you. You would actually have to remove the graphics card just to be able to access those additional slots. Now when we move down to the bottom right here, we're going to see that we have the optional temp header right here. So this is going to be essentially an OPT temp sensor. So if you want to be able to have additional temperature input source, you can put a thermistor on there, and you could have that. You can map that into the fan controls in the UEFI, or you could also map it into the operating system via Fan Expert. You then have a USB 2 header, internal header right here, and then another USB 2 internal header. This one can support 2 devices. This one can support a single device, so essentially 3 ports that you would have on the board. And then 1, 2, 3 more chassis fan headers. So in total, if we count our fan headers, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's going to be 4 plus the other 2 is going to be a total of 6. When we move over to the ARGB, we've got 2 ARGB, and again, you can multiplex these, so you can support 2, 3, 4, 5 ARGB devices. Generally 3 devices, no problem. Even 4 devices generally is not an issue. It just depends on the power requirements for those RGB devices that you're going to be connecting. So you got 2 down here, and then another one at the top, so that means a total of 3. And now this board is actually already going to come with Thunderbolt, but it does optionally have actually the USB 4 and the Thunderbolt add-in header that you would have available to you. This actually should be able to support also the upcoming actually Thunderbolt 5 add-in card, while this board actually does not have Thunderbolt 5, it has Thunderbolt 4. So that could be an option that you would want to be able to upgrade to. Then lastly right here, you have your audio. This is the isolated audio design with the Supreme Effects audio codec and the SavvyTech audio amp and audio grade capacitors, and of course our enhanced software suite. So overall, that gives you the full flyover of what we're going to have on the ROG Strix B860-F gaming Wi-Fi. But now let's go ahead and take a closer look at the rear I/O. Okay, taking a closer look here at the rear I/O, we've got an HDMI port and a DP port. Directly below that, we're going to be moving up to essentially the 5 gigabit ports that we have here. This is going to be 4 Type A ports, 5 gig, all of them. Directly below that, we can see that we've got our Thunderbolt port, or essentially 40 gigabit port. So that's a really nice upgrade right there. That is going to be even twice as fast as this USB-C port, which is 20 gigabits, which is going to be 4 times as fast as the 5 gigabits port. So it's a super fast port. Very, very nice to be able to see that essentially on a B860 based motherboard. So very, very cool in that respect. So that is also going to be, again, a differential that you're not going to see on Tough Gaming. You're not going to get the Thunderbolt, although it does have the Thunderbolt header, and you're not going to see dual USB-C. In addition to that, if we also take a look at the total port count, we've got 4 right there, we've got 2 right there, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're going to have a total of our 9 ports right there. Essentially almost 10, which you generally see on the ATX side for the ROG Strix series models, and then 2.5 right here. This also supports the ROG Land Guard design with ROG Land Guard that helps to protect it from surges, spikes, sags, things along those lines. You then also have that clear CMOS button, which we had on the Dash A, USB BIOS flashback, which works in conjunction with this port right here. Normally it's actually a USB 2 port, but it's actually this time around the 10 gigabit port. That will allow you to update the UEFI BIOS. No CPU, no DRAM, no graphics card, just plug in the corresponding power supply and you're good to go. I'm going to show you right there again for your Wi-Fi 7, your Q antenna. Really easy to be able to remove, really easy to connect, and of course it has also better signal attenuation performance. So again, that clear CMOS USB BIOS flashback button, Q antenna with Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth, then your optical audio output, and then your line level connections. So that is going to round out the I/O on the ROG Strix B860-F gaming Wi-Fi. Now moving from our ATX-based motherboards, we're going to go into our micro ATX-based motherboard with the ROG Strix B860-G. This is a really great choice for those of you who want to go for a compact-based build, especially if you want to complement this with something like our A21 or AP201 chassis, which we also offer in white. Can go great with, of course, our white-themed components where we've got dual graphics cards, which are actually in white. We have ROG Strix and Prime Series coolers, which are white. We have Tough Gaming or ROG Strix or Loki Series power supplies that are all in white. So it can really offer you a great foundation for a bold and bright themed system, and also even supporting fans with our TF120 and TR120 fans, which all come in white as well. I think this is a great looking board. It's got a great set of features and functions and spec, including even Thunderbolt on there, which is pretty sweet. But with that, let's go ahead and throw it into our secondary camera and take a closer look at this board. Alright guys, so here we can see that we've got the ROG Strix B860-D gaming Wi-Fi. This is going to be an MATX based motherboard. So pretty much starting off, it's going to look very similar to the Dash A, which is of course the ATX white theme based board. Very similar in terms of the look and feel with that white PCB, the silver accents, the same overall kind of contrast design here, really designed for kind of bold and bright based themes that you're going to have for PC builds. So in terms of the power delivery design, very performant, very high spec right here. This is going to be a 14+1+2+1, 80 amp power stages, large robust VRM heat sinks. Again, doesn't matter whether you go with a Core Series Ultra 2, 5, 7, or 9 series processor. They're all supported, but again, B860 doesn't support overclocking for the CPU, so to be mindful of that. You can see this full, nice extended VRM heatsink that even goes, again, all the way up to the integrated I/O shield that we have on the motherboard. Again, this is just like all the other boards where it has the integrated RGB also right here. So once it powers to the board, you can go ahead and customize that to your heart's content. Now, when we go ahead and take a look at our connections, we've got the dual CPU power connections right there. Those are featuring the ProCool power connector design. So, of course, that means that we have essentially improved current handling and we reduce resistance, better temperature performance. 2 CPU power connectors, CPU fan connectors right there, CPU and CPU optional. Great for 240 millimeter or push and pull tower heatsink based cooling designs. You can multiplex that out there just like the other boards if you want to be able to run 3 fans. Then you've got your AIO pump header, which of course goes well with any type of AIO cooling solutions that require direct pump header for the motherboard. You've got 2 ARGB headers up here at the top of the motherboard, which is a little bit different compared to the other motherboards that we took a look at. Then we've got our 24-pin power right there. Directly below that, we've got a 10 gigabits internal USB-C, and then we have our legacy USB 3 that's going to be on this board. And then you got your 4 DIMM slots again with these really nice Patriot white DDR5 based memory. Again, you can readily support higher speeds on here. For probably most of you, you're probably going to be targeting somewhere between 6,000 to probably 7,400, but you can't even run higher speeds. But as always, keep in mind, overclocking isn't guaranteed. guaranteed, and you have to account for the margin of the memory controller on the CPU. Now we move over here, we'll see a couple of things. The first one is going to be that PCI Express graphics card slot, which does support Gen 5 operation for, of course, the future. As of right now, there is no GPU that supports PCI Express Gen 5. And just like the other boards, there is no lever, there's no switch. And for a small form factor build, I absolutely love this Q-Release slim design implementation. That just means that you're going to have a really easy way to be able to go ahead and remove the graphics card, just pull out a little bit from the front, and bam, the graphics card pulls out. So that is going to be Q-Release slim. Just like the other boards where we demonstrated, you have also that fully integrated heatsink and quick latch design. So just go ahead and open that lever, pull out, and you're good to go. You've got that large dense heatsink for Gen 4, Gen 5 M.2 SSDs. Remove that thermal film and you're good to go. You've got a dual contact design just like the other boards, and you can pop in your M.2 SSD and you would be good to go. So very, very simple, as you can see right there. And we're all set. And again, that's a key difference between tough gaming models and the ROG Strix models in terms of that design. So to remove the M.2 SSD, just go ahead and depress that, and you can remove the drive and you're good to go. All right, so going below that, we can see that we've got a large heatsink right here. This will actually allow you to have access to 2 more M.2 SSDs, which are going to be Gen 4. So PCI Express Gen 5 or Gen 4, and then 2 Gen 4. So that's a total of 3 M.2 SSD slots on this motherboard. As we then move down here to the bottom of the board, we can see that we've got 4 SATA ports that are going to be on here, another fan header, another ARGB header. So that's going to be combined with the 2 headers that we had at the top. So 3 ARGB headers, a chassis fan header. Then we've got a USB 2 header that we're going to have there, and then another chassis fan header. So that's going to be 1, that's going to be 2, then you're going to have 3 and 4 along with that AIO pump header that you also have on the board. As we move all the way down over here to the other corner of the board, we're going to have the discrete isolated audio design, the SupremeFX audio design, which has an improved audio codec, the audio grade capacitors, and a Sopitech audio amp on this board as well. So that rounds out everything that we have here physically on the motherboard. From here, we're going to get ready to go ahead and take a closer look at the rear I/O. I did also want to go ahead and make sure and note that that little guy right there as 2 pins is still actually the OPT temp sensor. So you still have the OPT temp sensor still on this Micro ATX motherboard as well. So taking a look at the rear I/O, we've got an HDMI port, we've got a DP port right there, we've got 4 Type A ports, which are going to be USB 2. This is a USB BIOS flashback port, which of course it works in conjunction with this button right here. Allows you to low-level update the UEFI BIOS. No CPU, no graphics card, no DRAM. Just connect the PSU and you're good to go. From there, you've got, of course, the Thunderbolt port, which is really nice to see again on this mid-range series chipset. That's 40 gigabits. That is, of course, going to be twice as fast as the 20 gigabits port right there. And then it's also going to be, significantly faster than your 5 gigabits or your 10 gigabits ports. So again, you've got an ultra high speed Thunderbolt or USB 40 gigabits port on the rear of this motherboard, along with 2 Type C ports. So a nice addition right there. 5 gigabit Type A, and then a 10 gigabit Type A, and then that 20 gigabits USB C that we have right there. Then from there, we've got our 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, which is also going to have the ROG LandGuard design, which of course helps to protect from surge spikes and sags, and then 2 more 5 gigabit Type A ports. So that's going to be a total of 2, 4, 6, 10 rear ports on this board. Quite nice. You also got your clear CMOS button, that USB BIOS flashback, your Q antenna right there for your Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4, and just like we've shown before, that gives you that nice push fit design, better signal attenuation performance, really easy to be able to go ahead and connect and disconnect when it comes to your Wi-Fi antenna, your optical audio out, and then your line level connections. So that is going to round out the I/O on the ROG Strix B860-G gaming Wi-Fi. All right, so let's get ready to go ahead and take a look at our last motherboard within our ROG Strix B860 series lineup, and that's going to be the ROG Strix B860-I. Now we need to remove this little banner title just so you can actually see this motherboard. It's so compact, and this is going to be, of course, a fantastic choice for those of you that are going to be considering a small form factor build. So if you're going for those really compact builds, you're going to want to go for Mini ITX, but you still want a great set of functions and features, especially considering, I think, the nice efficiency improvements that Intel has introduced within these latest generation CPUs. The really nice I/O configuration and the really solid spec. This is going to be a great option for those of you who are going to be considering an Intel-based small form factor based build. So with that, let's go ahead and throw it under the secondary camera and give you a full tour over of what we can expect on this board. All right, so let's go ahead and take a closer look at the Dash I. You can see how much smaller it is compared to actually an ATX-based motherboard. It's got a really cool minimal design ID on here. It does have some ROG Strix branding, but I really do think it's quite subtle, quite nicely done in terms of actually this implementation. Monochromatic throughout, so no fixed colors to contend or compete with the build, although in many ITX builds you can't really see the motherboard is going to be all covered up. But let's go ahead and jump into the core specs here. So from power delivery, it's very solid. You've got a 10 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1 80 amp power stages. You have a nice, very large performant heatsink assembly on here, which makes contact with the power stages and the inductors. It's actually a two-stage design, which means that from here to here, and you can also see that heat pipe which connects in, helps ensure that you're going to get a good temperature performance for this VRM even if it's under load. It doesn't matter what CPU you put in there. Again, it could be a Core Series Ultra 2, 5, 7, or 9. You're entirely fine. From there, if we look over here, we've got one 8-pin CPU power connector. This does again have the ProCool power design, so that means it's going to have increased current handling. It has lower temperatures because of less resistance. From your 3 headers on here, really like the position and the placement here for these headers. They work really well for mini ITX. You're going to have one AIO pump header, one chassis fan header, and one CPU fan header. Keep in mind for the CPU fan header, it's very easy to multiplex it out, so you can go ahead and have 2 or even 3 fans coming from that one CPU fan header, and the same thing for the chassis fan header, so a lot of flexibility. Main differential between an individual fan header as opposed to multiplexing out from a single header is that all the fans that are connected to one single header will share the same PWM control signal, so that is something that you just want to keep in mind. Moving next to that, we've got 2 ARGB headers on this motherboard, which is nice to see, especially with the majority of all of the kind of devices on the market now being ARGB based. Next to that, you can also see that you've got a power button that's going to be on the motherboard. This board also does have clear CMOS, which is going to be on the rear. You then have your 24-pin motherboard power. You have an internal 10 gigabits USB-C. You then have your legacy USB 3, and then you've got 4 SATA ports. You've got your 2 DIMM slots that are going to be on there, and then also very nice low-profile based design. Even right here, you can notice within this heatsink right here, it means that there's essentially very little, if any, conflict that you're going to have with the cooling solutions you're going to mount on this board, which sometimes can be a design consideration that we have to really account for when we're talking about these small form factor based motherboards. All right, before I get over here into the M.2, I do want to talk a little bit more about some of the specialized kind of headers and connectors that you're going to have actually included with this Dash I, which are specifically really well suited to mini ITX and small form factor builds. So normally this is going to be your front panel connector, which is usually going to be on the bottom of the motherboard, but we've moved it right over here to the right hand side. It's a much better location, very easy to work with, and you also still get our nice little extension cable. So this will make that process simpler. So I can pretty much go ahead and connect this. So it would be like this, and then you can make your front chassis leads connect over where it's going to be easier for you and not necessarily be obstructed. When we go down here towards the bottom of the motherboard, here you're going to have actually a very nice large heat sink right here. Now, not a quick, easy design in terms of removing it. There are going to be 3 screws. That's though to help to really ensure that we get very good thermal performance in contact with the highest wattage and the highest performing Gen 4 and Gen 5 based drives, which again, this one does support PCI Express Gen 5 for this slot. And then there's actually another M.2 slot on the rear, which I'll show you. You then also have the introduction of the Q-Release Slim design, which is really nice for the Mini ITX series. Again, especially for these small form factors builds, this is absolutely fantastic to have this design on a small form factor board, because again, trying to remove a graphics card could be so much more difficult on this type of board. But again, all I need to do is lift up and then I'm good to go. So really nice and easy design in regards to the Q-Release Slim. Now right here, you are going to see that you have 2 other connectors. One is going to be your front HD audio, and the other one is going to be the USB 2. We have kind of given you this little routing path that you have right there. But for the USB 2 header, there is actually also going to be a breakout right there. So you do have some flexibility that right here, you can go ahead and connect this if you do need essentially more ports depending on kind of your configuration. So again, it would be pretty much something like that, right? And then you could run that out accordingly if you need to be able to have those essentially additional USB 2 connections. So that is going to be another accessory that comes with the board. Okay, so you've got your easy connect for your front chassis leads, and then you've got essentially your USB 2. So those are going to become included. The Q-Release Slim, and then the isolated audio design as well, which still also includes the the Savitech audio amp and the improved ROG audio package. And then don't forget, we still put it on there right there. That little 2-pin header is going to be the OPT header so that you can still have essentially that optional temp sensing on this mini ITX based motherboard. So really nice addition as well on that side. So from there, let's go ahead and take a look at the rear IO on this board. Actually, but before we take a look at the rear IO, I did forget, as I noted, you actually have a back plate right there. It adds a little bit more rigidity. It also can help to protect sometimes some elements of the rear of the motherboard. Just because sometimes some boards get a little bit more flex, especially with some larger assemblies, depending on the cooling solutions, this can also add and benefit you a little bit there. But this is actually where you have the other M.2 SSD slot on the rear of the board. You can see right there, and then you would just use your traditional screw to be able to lock that in place. So that is going to be your M.2 SSD on the rear. That one's going to be PCI Express Gen 4, and this one is going to be PCI Express Gen 5. Okay, so let's go and take a look at the rear IO on this board. I think we're going to be able to fit this one entirely in the frame here. So we can see we've got an HDMI port, a DP port. We've got that 40 gigabits Thunderbolt port right there. We've got a 5 gigabit Type A. We've got our 2.5 gigabit Ethernet with the RG LAN guard, again, to protect from surges, spikes, sags, things along those lines. We then have 4 more Type A ports, 5 gig, USB 2, USB 2. We've got a clear CMOS button right there. And then from there, we've got 2 more USB ports down here at the bottom. So a 20 gig, so dual USB-C and 10 gig. So still quite nice because we've got 2, 4, and then 4 right there. So that's going to be a total of 8 ports, with again being 2, 4, and then 6 of those ports all being high-speed based ports. And love the fact that here again we've got a 10, we've got a 20, and we have a 40 gigabit port. So right there we've got Wi-Fi 7 with Bluetooth, and of course this, just like the other ones where we've demonstrated, is going to be the Q antenna design. So that means it's that nice, simple, easy push fit design, better signal attenuation performance. You're good to go. So that is going to be the Wi-Fi 7 with the Q antenna and the Bluetooth. And then, of course, at the bottom, you've got your optical and you've got your line level connections as well. So that wraps up the I/O that we have on the Dash-I motherboard. All right, so that wraps up our overview on our 4 ROG Strix B860 based motherboards. So the Dash-A, the Dash-F, the Dash-G, and the Dash-I. I think you can see that these are going to be a great series of motherboards for those of you going to be considering an Intel socket 1851 based platform build, regardless of whether you want to go bold and bright with white based boards, you want to go small form factor with the Dash-I, you want to go medium form factor with the Dash-G, or if you want to go with the traditional base build with the Dash-F or the Dash-A. Some really great options right here. So with that, I'd lastly want to give you guys a little bit just of insight and some of the cool features that we're going to have in regards to the UEFI firmware and the software. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the UEFI functions and features that you're going to see. So the first one we want to touch on is going to be our enhanced fan controls. So we're going to now have an 8-point fan control system that's available to you within the UEFI BIOS. So any fans that are connected to the corresponding chassis fan headers or to the CPU or the CPU OPT header will be able to leverage this. Again, you can do this within the UEFI BIOS, or you can do it within the operating system via Armory Crate and Fan Expert. But you have 8 points versus 4 points in the prior generation. And this is just going to give you more granularity and control to be able to dial in the fan configuration to your liking. And this can really complement especially the higher performing fans that have been coming to the market. So fans that you're going to have operating at, 1800, 2000, 25, even upwards of 3000 RPM. This is going to be definitely beneficial in this respect. And again, we still have our fan calibration and profiling, which means you can run software to be able to figure out what the minimum and the maximum operating fan curves are, and then give you an easy toggle to be able to kind of dial in, hey, do I want standard, silent, turbo, or do I manually set my fan curve? You also still have temperature input mapping as well that you can do within the UEFI BIOS or the operating system. So if you wanted, let's say, have your fans respond to the GPU as a temperature input source, that is something you can do. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about Q Dashboard. This is a BIOS-based utility which allows you to see a representation of your motherboard and actually the ports and slots that are in use. You can see right here, we can see that our CPU fan header is connected. We can click on it and it takes us directly to the actual CPU fan controls. So it's really quite useful. It's a really nice and intuitive application and utility that we now have built into the UEFI BIOS. And you also have some really nice filters that are in the bottom right-hand corner, which allow you to actually quickly filter out different types of corresponding connections or slots that you would have on the motherboard. Now, another feature that I'm going to talk about here is actually going to be one that combines the UEFI BIOS and then also actually combines something that would be in the operating system. So DIMFit is something that we talked about where we actually have this great feature within the UEFI BIOS that if you're going to be using overclock-based memory and you run into an issue, for many users, they don't know how to resolve those issues. They might just think, maybe the board has an issue or the UEFI BIOS needs to be improved upon. While we continually make optimizations to the UEFI BIOS. Sometimes the reality is that there's a lot of variance in terms of how the memory controller, the board, and specific ICs work. And you have to have sometimes certain specific parameters dialed in that might be specific to your configuration to really make sure that it's successful, regardless of the tuning that we do on our side. And this can be complicated for the user to know, hey, I need to go in and make an adjustment to this voltage or this tertiary timing or to this skew rate, just because they're not as knowledgeable. And so DIMFIT actually will allow it to go through a memory training process that makes a wide range of adjustments that we're aware of that can help to really improve interoperability and compatibility, especially when you start to overclock your memory at higher and higher levels. We're generally talking about speeds that would probably be usually around like 7600 and higher. So if you were to buy a higher speed memory kit, you have an issue. So let's say you put it in the system post, but then maybe it doesn't fully boot, or it gets into Windows and you run a couple of tests and it crashed. Then you can actually run DIMFIT. It usually takes about 3 hours worth of time to actually execute. It will give you a new profile, and then you can boot up and actually see if it improves your experience. And I can tell you from even real world hands-on testing, it actually works. It's pretty cool. We can't guarantee that it will resolve every issue, but it's another way to help to improve upon your success when you attempt to pursue using overclocked memory configurations. Now, how does this tie into ASUS AI Advisor? This is a great actually application that we have available that you can download. It uses a ChatGPT-like system where you can ask questions about features, functions, specs, ASUS-based functions and features, but it also ties in actually direct UEFI controls. So an example is you could actually ask it, let's say, hey, how do I make my system quieter? And it can give you actually the direct hooks to the fan controls for your system. So you could actually just click silent directly from the response, and it would actually quiet down your system. Or if maybe you want to overclock your memory, it can actually help you to engage XMP directly from within the operating system. So it's actually not only there just to be able to provide you more information about better understanding the features, the function, the design of your products with a high degree of accuracy, but also has some really cool functionality in terms that it can directly actually enable certain functions or features that we have kind of tied in directly into the backend. So that is going to be ASUS AI Advisor. All right, so that overall wraps up our overview on our 4 ROG Strix B860 based motherboards. Hopefully you found this interesting and useful, and it gave you a better sense of understanding of these boards. Now keep in mind that when this overview is being released, it's in alignment with the initial preview embargo. We'll actually probably have a performance-centric live stream where we'll dive into actually more items for these respective motherboards. And as always, you want to make sure to just subscribe to the PCDIY YouTube channel, to subscribe to the ASUS North America YouTube channel for more information. You can also make sure to check out the corresponding product pages, as well as the landing page for our motherboards to be able to find the most comprehensive information. And if you have more questions or comments, feel free to drop them into the comment section below, and we'll do our best to go ahead and follow up as we can. I'd also recommend consider joining our ASUS PCDIY Heartbeat community. It's an amazing community of like-minded PCDIY enthusiasts where you can ask questions and get responses not only from them, but also from ASUS representative, be able to be involved in community contests, beta testing, be able to find out about the newest functions, features, and products that are coming to market, and so much more. So make sure to check us out and join our community there. The link is also in the description. So with that, best of luck with your builds, and make sure to go ahead and drop us a like and a subscribe, and take care and take it easy.